let's talk about what the American people think of the economy. We have some pretty troubling economic data on how the American consumer and how American investors are seeing the economy. And America is a consumption-based model. Without consumption, the American economic model does not work. And so things like consumer confidence, how much consumers feel confident going out, putting their money down, buying products, that they're gonna get a good deal, that prices aren't gonna go up, and that they're not gonna have to take that money and save it and put it away where it's not moving and flowing through the economy. The economic equivalent of taking your money, taking your capital out of the market and shoving it into bed springs because you think there are rough times to come. Well, let me tell you about some rough times to come, because consumer confidence right now has sunk to the lowest level since May of 2020 during the peak of the pandemic. This is when the international market saw a decline. This is when consumption around the entire globe went down. Economic productivity went down. The international markets had really no positive responses to this. It was all negatives. It was a bad time for the international market. There was questions about a global recession. There was a global inflation crisis. And in the United States, it was an active discussion of whether or not we were going to enter a recession. We were able to narrowly avoid a recession. After the next president, Biden, was sworn in, we narrowly avoided one due to, different packages of subsidies and American consumers getting back on the market and consuming. But we have the same economic lack of confidence in the engine, the consumer of the American economy, that we've had during the peak of a global pandemic. During the peak of a global pandemic. Talk about a self-inflicted wound. How do you go from I'm going to deliver all of these economic benefits to you on day one, just like I'm going to deliver the peace deal on day one. Your groceries are going to go down. It's going to be a higher standard of living. We're going to bring down the cost of everything. It's going to be fantastic. And then 100 days in, consumer confidence is sunk. Investor confidence is sunk. JP Morgan is predicting it's more likely than not we're going to enter a recession. All the big other financial institutions are predicting somewhere between 40 and 55% likelihood of us entering a recession. Donald Trump right now is polling the worst on the economy he ever has. And that was what he got elected on. What does this mean? Well, let me show you what it means when we're talking about polling this bad. Is a recession likely in the next year? Roughly 70% of Americans, 70% roughly of Americans believe we're going to enter a recession in the next year. 30% say no. Now, mind you, that number.
This super chat is for the purpose of hiding my money from the stock market.
Hey, Dylan Burns TV is a great place to hide your money through economic woes and troubles at DylanBurns.tv. DylanBurns.tv. 30% is, roughly speaking, the amount of the country that's pretty diehard Trump. So this would be the population that is either in the Trump bubble or in his corner. That doesn't mean you voted for him. There are people who voted for him who've already jumped ship. But if you're in his corner, you don't think maybe that there's going to be a recession in the next year, because you see this as a pathway towards bringing production back to the United States. You see this as the United States getting its fair share from the international markets through the tariff policy, trying to get our fair share from Canada, from China, etc., and we're going to make them pay for it, ignoring the fact that the tariff is likely to be passed down, of course, to the consumer, because it is a tax on you for consuming from that country, not placed upon the country that the consumption is coming from. 70% of Americans thinking we're going to enter a recession. What does that indicate for consumer confidence? It indicates it's shot. It indicates people will want to save. And it indicates bad vibes. And while, maybe I should not resort to layman's terms, there is such a thing as crashing the economy off of vibes, off of everybody thinking it's a bad time to spend, put your money away. People pull their money out of the market and cause a panic. And we've seen how volatile the market has been. Vibes-based market, ups and downs is a real thing. Let's look at some more data. Is a recession likely in the next year? Now you can see the divide between Trump supporters and Harris supporters from the last election. So you can see that there is a divide, that it is the diehard Trumpers that seem to be the ones still in the trenches on this. Maybe there's a few centrists in between, but very likely or somewhat that we're going to enter a recession. 94% of Harris voters, only 6% said no. For Trump supporters, it's pretty high too. 39%, roughly 40%, said yes. It's somewhat, very, or some amount of likely that we're going to be entering a recession. 4 in 10 Trump supporters is already really high. That you're picking up all the centrists right there, all the people that you got from the suburbs to join your campaign because they wanted lower grocery prices when buying their loaf of bread for the 3 kids they stuff in the soccer mom van before driving off to school. Those people are the ones jumping ship. It's the base of the party that's staying. And look, the base of the party staying with you is good for donations. It's good for party unity. The Republican Party hasn't broken rake too much over this, even though the town halls are getting pretty feisty. But that's not how you win elections. That's not how you keep power. That's not how you grow your majority. That's not how you defend your position. And that's not how you win the approval of the American people. I wanted to show you a really interesting piece of information. So this is polling that was displayed on CNN. It's from ABC News. I believe it's an SSRS poll. Now, there was a poll done after, or at least there was data done looking into what people were Googling about Trump his first 100 days into office. What in relation to, the presidency and this office are we getting the most Googling about? And it was Twitter. Which makes sense because Trump became known pretty much as the Twitter president because of how much he was on the toilet, just letting his thoughts fly. Well, this time around, it isn't Twitter. It's tariffs. I remember 24 hours after the election talking about the story of how tariffs the night after the election, even though it was Trump's main economic message, and now we're seeing it in actuality, that the night after, one of the most searched things on the internet was, what's a tariff? What is a tariff actually? What is a tariff? It was his main economic message, and after his victory, everybody scrambled to figure out what it was, because the way he talked about it was just that this is a weapon against the country that is screwing us, not something that can actually have downstream negative economic implications for those in the U.S. economy. Well, we also have polling from SSRS on the disapproval of Trump in relation to these issues. Back in 2017, it was 67% for his Twitter use. For tariffs, it's now 65%. And this shows a big difference. And before it was, well, we don't like his rhetoric. We don't like the way he talks. We don't like the way he represents the United States, which does have policy implications. How you represent the United States, you talk about annexing this, annexing that, it has implications down the road. But now we're talking about policy. Tariffs, his main economic agenda item, having 65% disapproval. And that does not mean that it's 35% necessarily approval, by the way. There's always some people in the middle like, I don't know. But 65% disapproval. His main economic selling point when he was elected on the economy. That's not good. That's not winning numbers. Those are losing numbers for losers. Feelings about the economy. This is the data that kind of shook me to my feet, because seeing that word used in reference to the U.S. economy is poisonous for the vibes, which, as we know, does matter. Let me read you these numbers one after the other. 4% of Americans are enthusiastic about the economy. Enthusiastic. So 4%. These are going to be people who, oh my goodness, I can't wait for my manufacturing job to be back. Oh my goodness, I can't wait to make so-and-so country start treating us with respect. Oh my goodness, XYZ. Then you got 30% who's at optimistic. So combining to 34% of Americans who have either optimistic or enthusiastic, with only 4% being enthusiastic, beliefs about the economy. Now we get into the negatives. 29% pessimistic, so roughly the same as optimistic. But in comparison to the really good number of 4% enthusiastic, the highest number, the highest plurality is 37% for afraid. Afraid for the US economy. Data from SSRS. Afraid. Now, look, this is outside the margin of error of 3%, 2.9. This means it's the clear plurality of Americans saying that they feel afraid about where the US economy is. Now, if you are afraid, what do you do as a consumer? You save. You save because you believe that down the line you're going to need that money because things are going to get more expensive. And you want to make sure that if times are tough, you're going to be able to repair your car. You're going to be able to get medical treatment. And we all know how medical costs are in this country and the terrible crisis we have with medical debt. You're going to want to make sure that you can put food on the table for your kids. That's what you're going to concentrate on. You're going to save. And when you save, you don't spend. And when you don't spend, that consumerist engine that powers the United States gets less fuel. And I doubt the people who are pessimistic are exactly on a spending spree. Even though there is a slight spending spree actually happening, I do want to reference the fact that actually car sales last month went up something like 6.2%, which would kind of counteract the idea that people are not going to be buying cars.
Immoral, morally corrupt,
bankrupt man. Hey, Mike Cuban, thank you so much for the gifted tier 1 sub. I really do appreciate that. Thank you, thank you. But the reason that's happening, as at least why I think it's happening, why other economists think it's happening, I'm not an economist. I said that like I was an economist, is because people are front loading. They think that if there's a time to buy a car, it's now, while the goods that were shipped over didn't have the tariffs placed on them yet, because the next ones are going to have the tariffs placed on them. And even the domestically manufactured cars are going to have problems with, other components being imported for them, also making them more expensive. Even though Trump, seemingly after defending that position viciously for his, time for ever since Liberation Day, as he called it, seems to possibly be backpedaling on that, at least on some areas, to try to bring those prices down. This is not the vibes that the U.S. economy needs to avoid a recession. These are the signals the U.S. economy needs in order to have a slump in consumption that will have a downstream effect that could solidify into a recession. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. There are some positive economic indicators. For example, inflation is not skyrocketing right now. When people talk about tariffs being inflationary, inflation's like about 2.4%. That's a positive economic indicator. Some could read the increased consumption of cars differently than I do, even though I would disagree with that. It's not all just terrible. America is still a very strong economy. It still has the global reserve currency status. It still has some bark and bite. But when the engine that powers your economy is afraid to run, that does not bode well. That does not bode well. I think that's enough on the economy for now. I think we should move on to some Ukraine-Russia updates. Actually, no, we're not done on the economy. I still got one more thing I got to talk about, okay? Because everything we just talked about shows bad weather when it comes to certain imported goods, the American consumer's feelings, investor feelings, bad weather. Hell, I didn't even get into much detail about the ports that are empty in California, which could be an indication of, first, the ports are empty. What's empty after that? Shelves. And as much as you want to cover up economic damage, and tariffs can mold itself into the economy, especially when targeted in a way that kind of removes the political implications of them because people cannot register it as much, Trump's very present with the fact that tariffs is his agenda. It was his main selling point, was tariffs. And so he's the tariff president who has a negative rating on his tariffs. And these companies got to put the cost somewhere. These tariffs are, in reference to China, we're talking about over 100% tariffs. We're talking about countries like Vietnam and others, pretty large tariffs. Europe, not Russia though, not Russia. That's the 3.1 billion in trade from Russia. Amazon wants to make, or was talking about, as we found out, making it transparent to the consumer where these costs are coming from. So, what was being discussed at Amazon, but what was reported as by Punchbowl News. Now, when I say discussed and reported as, I'm responding to as Punchbowl reported this as, and Amazon responded that it was being discussed. I'm not saying that necessarily that's how it went. I'm just saying that that was Punchbowl News' original statement, and then that is how Amazon responded. But Amazon was in some way thinking about taking the tariff costs that are going to be passed down to the consumers of their website as a giant marketplace and marking it on the item when you buy it, or marking it on the item on the listing, so you could see, oh, this item is $80 and 20 of those dollars come from the tariff. Or, hey, it was $50 before and now it's $100 with the 100% increase due to the tariff. This, to me, I mean, I think it'd be great if we had as much consumer transparency as possible. I wish that when food items or anything was listed, there was specific breakdowns somewhere that you could check, whether it's on a website or elsewhere, to see exactly where the costs come from. How much the store or restaurant you're going to values their labor costs, so you know where your money is going to. I want consumers to be as informed as possible so they can make good decisions and reward those who benefit the economy the most, and not those who can take advantage of the fact that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been gutted unconstitutionally. So I like this idea. I think it should also be applied to a bunch of other fields. I would go ham on this idea 10 times further, but I like the idea. I think Americans consumers should know where these costs are coming from. Of course, there's always the threat of companies lying in order to try to increase profits or whatever, but more transparency is a good thing. Trump's base loved the idea of transparency. That's why they were excited to get it for Jeffrey Epstein. Remember the Epstein files? Where did that go? You guys remember where that went? I don't think that really went anywhere, did it? That was a lot of blacked out text. Man, the transparency president is going to reveal all, blacked out a lot of text. What's going on there? Anyway, point is, though, I like this type of transparency. The Trump administration doesn't. Trump complained to Bezos before Amazon said its scrapped idea to display tariff costs. The White House slammed Amazon for reportedly planning to display the cost of President Donald Trump's tariffs next to the total price of products on its site. This is their exact quote. This is a hostile and political act by Amazon. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said at a press briefing with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Amazon later clarified that the plan to show off the tariff was never approved and is not going to happen. Trump then personally called Bezos on Tuesday morning to express his displeasure about the initial report that spurred the heated response from the White House. And considering Jeff Bezos was at that inauguration, and he seems to be doing his best to rub shoulders with the man, him reversing course quickly makes sense. I mean, I think there's probably less political motivation here when it comes to Jeff Bezos. I really don't think it's a political motivation for Jeff Bezos. I mean, it will probably hurt Trump if every time someone buys something off of Amazon that is affected by these tariffs, it says, hey, the tariffs did it. And you don't even need to write Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is tariff man. He's the guy who idolizes President McKinley's, first half in office, not the second half when he said, actually, I think our time for tariffs has passed and the economy is modernized in a way. He doesn't listen to how President McKinley actually viewed tariffs by the time he was done using them. Just President McKinley before he was president, when he was talking big game on the campaign trail. Like Donald Trump, who seems to be reversing course on a lot of these tariffs. A lot of historical repetitions. History does not repeat itself. It often rhymes. Anyway, Trump goes out there and he tries to get Bezos to stop it. Karoline Leavitt calls it a political act. It's not a political act. Jeff Bezos is a businessman who wants money so he can shoot up people into space, wear his cowboy hats, his beautiful sunglasses, and have all that money. Okay, I'm sure he has other personal motivations, but Amazon is a money-making machine. Its goal is profit and market share. Profit and market share. And if a bunch of products go up in price, including Amazon's competitor for Temu, which is where a lot of this, according to Amazon, was concentrated, then what do you do as Amazon? Do you just bite the bullet, add the price, and leave it as? Or do you try to tell the consumer, look, this is not our fault. You can still trust Amazon. We're not trying to screw you with these prices. It's the fault of the Trump administration. It's the tariffs. But the thing is, they can say tariffs, but people know because he's a tariff man. It's the Trump administration. And when inflation goes up, they look at who's in the White House. A lot of people don't think, oh, well, how much of this was caused by X, Y, and Z? Even though in this case, it's pretty self-inflicted. Let me show more of the logic here from the White House. This is from a White House official on the fact that this policy was going to be implemented. Of course he was pissed in reference to President Trump. Why should a multi-billion-dollar company pass off costs to consumers? Is Bernie Sanders this White House official? Who is this White House official? Where did all this red talk come from? I'm sorry, what? If it's more expensive to produce a product, the cost has to be borne somewhere. And whether you're laying off workers or you're cutting production quantity or you're cutting certain safety standards or whatever it is, like the cost has to be borne somewhere. And when you're talking about a massive spanning organization like Amazon, I doubt they're of the interest of losing their market share or reeling in this massive operation that they've taken decades to build from a book sharing service to the economic behemoth that it is now. Look, I don't believe that oligarch Jeff Bezos appealing to like the poor consumer. I'm sure from a business perspective, he cares about the consumer and keeping them happy so they keep coming. Probably part of the reason why he wanted them to think that it's not their fault. It's not Amazon's fault that these prices are more expensive. And it isn't. It isn't Jeff Bezos' fault. It isn't Amazon's fault. It's the fault of the White House who made the policy. That's why it's more expensive. He's just making it transparent that it was the tariff that creates it. But that transparency scares them. And this hope that all these companies, through, I guess, patriotism or love of country, would decide to tighten their belt, not through layoffs, because if they did layoffs, Trump would probably just be as angry because of mass layoffs during his administration probably is not something that he wants as a headline. So that's another thing he would be angry at. So it can't be born there. So where is it going to be born? And the bonuses that the executives get? Is that what you're hoping for? I mean, that would be nice, wouldn't it? But this is the United States. And I think we should remind ourselves that that's the country that we're living in. And also, the president is Donald Trump, a businessman who's friend to the rich. Okay, this is a man who talks constantly about lowering taxes. He gutted the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau with Elon Musk after it was created in the midst or in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis in order to protect consumers. And in that time, it's returned to over 200 million of Americans, the majority of Americans, over $20 billion that were scammed from them. And we're gutting that. If you care about consumers, why aren't you keeping the institution that defends them from scams? If the cost of consumers, okay, then why aren't we defending consumers? They're scared that when people see that number and they understand it's tariffs, everybody Googled tariffs because they knew that's what Trump was going to do. Then the majority of people don't like the tariffs. And if they have more reason to not like the tariffs, that 65% disapproval number is only going to go up because so many people use Amazon, including many of the people who say they don't use Amazon. This standard that the Trump administration wants to hold, that, these companies, to protect the Trump administration, shouldn't pass the cost off to consumers. That didn't happen during the Biden administration. That didn't happen during any other administration. These companies are going to try to keep their profitability, and they're going to do what's necessary to do that. And so this hope that it's not going to be passed off to consumers is just hope. It's just hope. Euro's actually up to 20% reserve currency status, actually. I didn't know that. Guess it went up.